Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe and tap the bell icon. The airport terminal was bustling with activity as travelers hurried from gate to gate, dragging suitcases behind them, some rushing to catch their flights, others calmly sipping coffee. But for Emily, everything seemed to be moving in slow motion. Her heart raced, a heavy weight in her chest, and the soft murmur of voices around her sounded distant, almost muffled. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She was at the counter of the airline's customer service desk, standing face to face with a flight attendant whose polite but firm expression did nothing to calm Emily's rising panic. She'd just been informed that her first-class seat, one she had booked months ago with the best available package, was no longer hers. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the attendant said, a little too calmly for Emily's liking. "We've had to reassign your seat due to a technical issue. You've been moved to economy." "Excuse me?" Emily blinked, not sure if she had heard the woman correctly. The words didn't make sense. First class wasn't just a seat. It was her escape, her luxury. She had always flown first class with her husband, Daniel. Their tickets were always booked in advance, their arrangements always set. First class was their guarantee of comfort, of status. Why? She managed to ask, trying to stay composed even though she felt her knees tremble. The attendant looked at her with a polite but distant smile, as if this kind of thing happened every day. "I'm afraid that's all the information I can give you. It's company policy, ma'am." Emily's stomach turned. "You can't be serious. I paid for this ticket. I booked first class months ago. My husband's "I'm sorry, ma'am," the attendant interrupted her, shaking her head with a practiced smile. "Your new seat assignment is in economy. Please make your way to gate 23. Something in her voice felt off, a little too rehearsed. This wasn't the answer Emily had been expecting. She stood there frozen for a moment, processing the bizarre turn of events. Was it a mistake? Could they really just give away her seat without any explanation? But before she could say anything else, the attendant turned away to help the next customer, leaving Emily standing alone with her thoughts. Her hands tightened around her phone, and she quickly tapped out a message to Daniel. He would fix this. He always did. She hit send, praying for him to come through for her. They were married. He had connections. He had the power to make things right. As she waited, the minutes stretched. She watched other passengers walk past her, some casting brief glances in her direction. She couldn't help but feel their judgment, couldn't help but wonder if they were secretly whispering about the woman who had been denied her rightful place in first class. When her phone buzzed, it felt like a lifeline. It was Daniel. Relief flooded through her as she answered immediately, eager to hear his voice and get everything sorted out. "Emily? What's going on?" "I just got a call from the airline." Daniel's voice sounded urgent, distant. "They said you're having an issue with your seat?" "Yes, Daniel, I don't know what happened," Emily exclaimed, trying to keep her voice calm. "They've moved me to economy. I don't understand. Can you please call them and fix it? I don't want to fly in economy. You know I can't handle it. We always fly first class. What's going on?" Daniel's voice shifted, becoming colder, more controlled. "I've already spoken to them. I've taken care of it." Emily let out a shaky breath. "What do you mean? You've taken care of it?" "I've made sure you're going to be in first class," Daniel replied, his tone now sharp and final. "But there's something else." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? What else?" She could feel the tension in his words, even through the phone. Something didn't sit right. There was an edge to his voice she hadn't heard before. "Don't worry about it," Daniel said, his words clipped. "Just get on the plane. Everything's sorted." "Daniel, what's going on? What are you?" I said it's done, Daniel interrupted, his voice harder now. They're going to fix everything. You'll be in first class as planned. But they've also been given orders to fire everyone involved in this. It's all handled. Wait, what? Fire everyone? Emily repeated, her voice rising in disbelief. What are you talking about? You can't just. Listen, Emily, Daniel cut her off, his tone no longer comforting but commanding. I've made my decision. It's over. Just get on the plane. I'll explain when you get back. I'll see you soon. Before Emily could respond, the line went dead. She stood there, stunned, the weight of his words sinking in. Her legs felt like jelly. Fire everyone? What did that mean? How could Daniel have made such a drastic decision? She looked at the customer service desk, where the flight attendant was still helping passengers. Did Daniel's call mean he had forced them to act? Had he used his influence to get everyone involved in her seating reassignment fired? Or was there something darker at play here? Emily tried to shake off the rising unease, her breath shallow as she glanced around the terminal. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her, could sense their judgment. She was the woman who'd been moved to economy for no good reason. She was the one causing a scene, even if it wasn't her fault. But more than anything, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. What kind of revenge had Daniel orchestrated? And why had he felt the need to do it? She forced herself to breathe deeply, pushing the unease aside. She needed to get to the gate. She needed to board the plane. She needed to be on her way to her destination. Maybe then, when she had time to process everything, she could figure out what was really going on. As she walked toward the gate, her mind raced. Something was wrong. She couldn't explain it, but the entire situation felt like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Why would Daniel go to such lengths to ensure she was in first class? And why fire the staff involved? Her thoughts were interrupted as she approached the gate, where a new flight attendant greeted her with a warm smile. Hello, ma'am. Your seat has been reassigned to first class. I'll escort you to your seat. Emily nodded, her heart still pounding in her chest. She followed the attendant down the jet bridge, her mind spinning with questions. As she settled into her first-class seat, the luxury of the cabin felt surreal. Everything around her looked perfect, the plush leather seat, the soft lighting, the friendly staff offering her champagne. But none of it seemed to matter. It all felt hollow, as if she were sitting in a shell, empty and disconnected from reality. The plane began to taxi down the runway, and Emily's thoughts turned back to the call. What had Daniel done? What was really going on? The words he'd spoken echoed in her mind. I've made my decision. It's over. What decision? What was he hiding? And as the plane lifted off into the sky, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the storm she had just walked into was only beginning. The flight seemed like a blur to Emily. She barely registered the stewardess offering her a drink, her mind too wrapped up in the phone call with Daniel, and the unsettling way he had cut her off. It's over, he had said. It's done. Emily shifted in her seat, the plush first-class cushion beneath her feeling foreign, as though she didn't quite belong. She had flown first class many times, but today, it felt as though she were sitting in a stranger's seat, unwelcome and out of place. The luxury that had once comforted her now seemed to mock her confusion and growing anxiety. As the plane ascended into the sky, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The familiar hum of the engines, the soft sound of people talking in the distance, and the gentle sway of the plane should have been relaxing. But instead, her thoughts consumed her. What did Daniel mean when he said, "It's over"? What decision had he made without her knowledge? And why had he ensured the airline staff was fired? Her mind raced back to the moment in the terminal, the cold way the flight attendant had told her that her first-class seat was no longer hers. The confusion, the helplessness, it felt like a bad dream. And the more Emily thought about it, the more the dream started to feel like a nightmare. Emily reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she unlocked the screen. No new messages from Daniel. No updates. She couldn't bring herself to call him again, she was too afraid of what he might say. The last time had been too much to handle. Instead, she typed a quick message to her best friend, Kate. "Hey, something strange happened at the airport. Long story. I'll tell you when I land." She hesitated before hitting send, then pressed the button. Maybe Kate could help make sense of it all. But deep down, Emily knew that no one could really help her right now. Not until she understood what Daniel was really up to. An hour passed before the flight attendant started preparing the cabin for service. Emily was startled by the announcement that they would soon be serving dinner. She hadn't even realized how hungry she was, her stomach tight with worry and confusion. As she absent-mindedly accepted the meal, she found herself staring out of the window at the clouds below. The white cottony expanse stretched out as far as the eye could see, a vast emptiness that seemed to mirror the void inside her. She had married Daniel years ago. She had trusted him with everything, her heart, her life, her future. But now, she wasn't sure what she could trust anymore. The phone call. The sudden reassignment of her seat. The firing of the staff involved, it all pointed to something far bigger than she had ever anticipated. Emily pushed the thought from her mind and focused on the task at hand, eating. At least if she kept her mind occupied, she wouldn't have to think about the haunting questions that continued to swirl around her. But as the plane cruised through the sky, Emily felt as though the walls were closing in on her. There was no way she could ignore the feeling that something was terribly wrong. No way she could pretend that everything was normal. And then, just as she began to nod off, the sound of her phone buzzing broke through her drowsy haze. It was a message from Daniel. "I'm sorry, Em. I should have explained better. I'll make things right when you're back. I promise." She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. What did that mean? Make things right? What did he need to fix? What had he done? Emily quickly typed a reply. "What's going on, Daniel? You've been acting weird. What decision did you make? What happened at the airport? Tell me what's really going on." Her finger hovered over the send button for a moment, but before she could hit it, another message came through. This one was from an unknown number. Her stomach churned as she opened the message. She doesn't know, does she? Emily's pulse quickened as she read the words. Who is this? She thought. She didn't recognize the number, and the message didn't make sense. She quickly tapped out a response, her fingers trembling as she typed, "Who is this? What do you mean?" Seconds stretched into minutes before another reply came through. "Ask Daniel. Ask him why he made that call. Ask him what he's really hiding. You'll get your answers soon enough." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine. What was going on? Was someone messing with her? And why would they involve Daniel? Her mind raced. Could someone be threatening him? Could they be trying to manipulate her into doing something? She pressed her back against the seat, her mind spinning. Her stomach churned with a combination of fear, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. She had to talk to Daniel. She needed to understand. But deep down, a voice in her head was warning her that she might not like the answers she'd get. She quickly fired off another message to Daniel. "Someone just texted me. They said I need to ask you what you're hiding. What's going on, Daniel? Please, just tell me the truth." No response. Her heart sank. She had to wait. Wait for him to explain. But as the minutes ticked by, the uncertainty gnawed at her. She didn't know how much longer she could handle this feeling that something dark and dangerous was lurking just beneath the surface. As the plane continued its journey, Emily drifted in and out of a restless sleep, her mind racing with questions and fear. When the captain made the announcement that they were beginning their descent into their destination, Emily didn't feel the usual excitement or anticipation she normally had. Instead, there was a growing sense of dread. The plane touched down smoothly, but the moment they taxied to the gate, Emily felt like she was trapped in a storm. She was surrounded by people, strangers who went about their business as though nothing had happened. But she knew something was terribly wrong. She grabbed her phone and checked her messages again. Still no response from Daniel. The knot in her stomach tightened. What was going on? What had he done? And why had he not told her? She quickly gathered her belongings and exited the plane, walking through the terminal with a heavy heart. She had no idea what was waiting for her when she left the gate. All she knew was that nothing was as it seemed anymore. As she made her way to the baggage claim, she saw someone waiting for her. It wasn't Daniel, but a man she recognized, a tall figure in a dark suit with a cold, calculating expression. He stood motionless, watching her as she approached. "Emily Summers?" he asked in a voice that sent a chill down her spine. She nodded, her throat tight. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is David. I've been instructed to escort you." "Escorted to where?" Emily's voice shook with a mix of fear and confusion. David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at a piece of paper in his hand, then met her gaze again. "Mr. Summers has made arrangements for you. He's waiting for you." "Where?" Emily demanded, the panic rising in her chest. "Where is he? What's going on?" David finally looked at her and gave a slight nod, as though signaling her to follow. "You'll find out soon enough. Please, ma'am, come with me." And with that, Emily's world took another turn, one she wasn't ready for. The air in the terminal felt heavy, pressing in on Emily as she followed David, the stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. Her feet moved mechanically, almost as if her body were on autopilot, too numb with confusion to truly feel the weight of her steps. She glanced over her shoulder, looking for any sign of Daniel, but the crowd was too thick, and no one seemed to notice her or the man walking beside her. David led her through a maze of corridors, each one dimly lit and eerily quiet. The usual hustle of an airport terminal was missing, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to swallow every sound. It felt like they were entering a different world, one hidden behind the veil of everyday life. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being led into something far darker than she could imagine. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question had been on her mind since she first saw David, and she couldn't hold it in any longer. Her nerves were frayed, and her need for answers was unbearable. David didn't answer immediately, and that only fueled the anxiety building in her chest. He kept walking ahead, his movements deliberate and calm, as though they weren't on the brink of some unknown danger. Emily's heart raced as she tried to steady her breathing, but it was hard. The fear kept squeezing at her chest, making it harder to think clearly. "Mr. Summers is waiting for you," he said finally, his voice low, devoid of emotion. "He has a few things to explain." "Why are you doing this?" Emily asked, her voice shaky. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Something about David's detached demeanor unsettled her. He wasn't acting like someone who was just doing his job, he was playing a part in something much bigger. David didn't respond. Instead, he continued walking, his long strides leaving Emily scrambling to keep up. They passed through a set of doors, and she found herself in a dimly lit hallway that led to an elevator. She could see the faint reflection of herself in the elevator doors, looking small and insignificant in the grand scheme of whatever was unfolding around her. She couldn't remember the last time she felt so out of control. When the elevator arrived, David stepped inside without a word. Emily hesitated for only a second before following him. The doors closed, sealing them in the small, confined space. She glanced up at the digital display showing the floor numbers ascending, but she had no idea where they were going. The elevator felt like it was descending into the unknown. "Where are we going?" Emily repeated, her voice now tinged with frustration. "What's happening?" David didn't look at her, his gaze fixed forward. "You'll see soon enough." Emily swallowed, a knot forming in her stomach. The silence in the elevator felt suffocating, and the uncertainty of her situation pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The lights flickered briefly, casting strange shadows along the walls. Emily's mind raced with questions. Where was Daniel? Why hadn't he told her what was going on? And who was this mysterious man, David? Why had he called her Mrs. Summers, as though he knew her? The elevator jerked to a stop, and the doors slid open with a soft ping. Without saying a word, David stepped out, and Emily followed. She tried to steady her breath, the weight of the unknown hanging over her like a dark cloud. They emerged into what seemed like a private office area, its walls lined with dark wood and soft, amber lighting. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. She had no idea what she was walking into, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't prepared for whatever it was. At the end of the hallway, a door opened, and a figure emerged. It was Daniel. But he didn't look like the man she knew. His posture was stiff, his face unreadable. His eyes, usually filled with warmth and affection, were now cold, calculating, like a stranger's. "Emily," he said, his voice flat. It was the first time she'd heard him speak since the phone call earlier that day. She was flooded with a mixture of relief and confusion, but it quickly faded as she saw the way he looked at her. "Where have you been?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. She took a step forward, but something in Daniel's expression stopped her. "I had to take care of some things," he said, avoiding her gaze. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to believe him, but everything about this felt wrong. She had no idea where she was, why David was here, or what was going on. But she wasn't about to back down. She needed answers. "Why did you do this?" she demanded, her voice shaky but firm. "Why did you make that call at the airport? Why did they fire the staff? What's going on, Daniel?" Daniel's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, Emily saw a flicker of emotion, a hint of guilt, maybe, or regret. But it disappeared as quickly as it had come, leaving only the coldness behind. "Emily," he said slowly, "I never wanted you to be involved in this. But it's too late now." "What do you mean?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Involved in what? What is this?" David stepped forward, his expression stern. "You need to sit down, Mrs. Summers. There's a lot you need to understand." Emily's mind was spinning. "Sit down? I'm not sitting down until I get some answers." Daniel sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Please, Emily, just sit down. This will be easier for you if you listen." There was a long pause, but Emily finally relented, sinking into one of the plush chairs across from Daniel's desk. She felt trapped, cornered, and there was nothing she could do to escape the storm that was closing in on her. David remained standing by the door, watching her with a look of detached interest. He wasn't here to offer comfort. He was here to ensure everything went according to plan. Daniel took a seat behind the desk, folding his hands in front of him. He looked at Emily, his eyes finally meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't want you to find out like this. But you have to understand, Emily, the stakes are much higher than you think." "Stakes?" Emily echoed, her voice trembling. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Daniel leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "I've been involved in something that's bigger than both of us. There are people who don't want us to be together. And they'll stop at nothing to make sure we're not. That's why I had to make the call. That's why I had to protect you, even if it meant doing things I never thought I'd do. Emily stared at him, her mind reeling. What are you talking about, Daniel? Who's trying to hurt us? What are you involved in? Daniel's face hardened. I can't tell you everything right now. But you need to trust me. There are people who will hurt you if they think you're a threat. They've been watching us for a long time, and they know everything about us. A chill ran down Emily's spine. Who are these people? She wanted to scream the question, but her voice caught in her throat. She had no idea who Daniel was anymore. Emily, you need to leave the country, Daniel said urgently. Now. Before it's too late. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. What do you mean, leave? She stood up, her eyes wide with fear. What's happening, Daniel? Please, he said, his voice breaking for the first time. You have to trust me. There's no time to explain. They'll come for you if they think you're involved. I'm doing everything I can to protect you, but we need to get you out of here. David's cold voice interrupted, Mr. Summers is right. You need to leave now. Emily's head spun, and her legs felt like jelly. Nothing made sense. She couldn't process it fast enough. She turned to Daniel, searching his eyes for some sign of the man she had married, the man she thought she knew. But all she saw was fear, a fear that matched her own. But it was too late for questions. It was too late for second guesses. Daniel's next words hit her like a punch to the gut. They're already here. The chill in the air had thickened, crawling down Emily's spine like an icy hand gripping her heart. Daniel's voice hung in the air, and for a long moment, the words seemed to echo in her head, reverberating with a sense of finality. They're already here. The heaviness of the moment settled around her like a dense fog. Emily felt her body freeze. Her heart hammering in her chest. Who are they? She wanted to scream the question, but it felt like the answer was already written on her soul. She couldn't shake the overwhelming sense that she had stumbled too far into something dark and dangerous, a world where she had no place. David, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You need to listen, he said, his tone colder than ever. We don't have time for explanations. You're in danger. You both are. Emily's mind raced. Who are they? Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to speak. What do you mean, Daniel? What's going on? Why didn't you tell me? Daniel's face was taut, his eyes narrowed with a mixture of guilt and urgency. He reached out, his hands trembling as he grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her closer to him. You don't understand. You can't understand. If I told you everything, you wouldn't believe me. I didn't want you involved in this. But now it's too late. Emily stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. I don't understand. What are you talking about, Daniel? Who's after us? David stepped in between them, his cold eyes flicking toward the door, as if expecting something, or someone, to appear. His voice was low, almost a whisper. It's not about who's after you. It's about what you're involved in. You don't realize it yet, but you've already crossed a line. There's no going back now. Emily shook her head, feeling a wave of nausea wash over her. I don't care about any of this. She pulled her arm away from Daniel's grip, taking a step back. I just want answers. What's going on? Daniel's eyes softened for a split second, and then the hard shell he had built around himself returned. They're part of a network, Emily. A very powerful one. They deal with things that you couldn't even begin to imagine. And now, they think you know too much. That's why they're coming for you. Emily's breath caught in her throat. What does that even mean? What do you mean, coming for me? Her voice broke, and she almost didn't recognize the desperation in it. David's voice was unyielding. "We need to go. Now." "But," Emily began to protest, but the words died on her lips as the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, growing louder with each passing second. Daniel's eyes widened in panic. "They're here." Before Emily could react, David grabbed her wrist again, pulling her toward the door. "Come on, we don't have much time." His grip was firm, almost like he knew exactly what was at stake. They burst through the door, racing down the hallway as the footsteps behind them grew louder, quicker. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, and every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to escape. But the terror in Daniel's eyes told her that there was no escape, not really. They rounded a corner, and David led them down another corridor, one that seemed to stretch on endlessly, disappearing into darkness. Emily could barely keep up with his pace, her feet stumbling on the polished floor as she tried to process everything that had just happened. Her mind was spinning. Who were these people? Why had Daniel kept all this from her? Where are we going? Emily gasped, her chest tightening with panic. "Where are you taking me?" David didn't answer. He just kept moving, his eyes darting to the corners of the hall as though he was expecting someone to leap out at them from the shadows. The further they went, the more disoriented Emily became. The space around her seemed to close in, the walls pressing tighter as if they were suffocating her, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. They reached a door at the far end of the hallway, and David slammed it open with a force that startled Emily. "Get in," he commanded, pushing her into the small, dimly lit room. Before she could ask another question, David slammed the door shut behind them, locking it with a finality that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. She turned to him, her chest heaving as she tried to steady her breath. "David, what's going on? What do you mean, we're involved?" David didn't look at her. Instead, he was scanning the room, his eyes flicking over every inch as though searching for something. "We don't have time for this, Emily," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "They'll be here any second. And when they come, they'll stop at nothing." Emily shook her head, unable to process it all. What did Daniel mean? Who are they? David's face hardened, and for the first time, Emily saw a hint of emotion flicker across his stoic expression. "You're part of something now. A very dangerous game. A game you never asked to be a part of, but you're in it now. And they won't stop until they get what they want." A loud bang echoed through the hallway outside, followed by hurried voices. The sound of footsteps grew closer, faster. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "They're here. They've found us." David turned toward her, his face grim. "Stay quiet. Don't make a sound. We'll wait until it's safe." Emily nodded, her entire body tense with fear. She didn't know who these people were, or what they wanted with her, but she knew one thing for sure: her life had changed forever. There was no going back to the life she had known. Everything she thought she understood about her world had been shattered in a matter of hours. She glanced toward the door, her thoughts racing. What had Daniel been involved in? Why hadn't he told her the truth? What were they after? The silence in the room grew thick as they waited, the footsteps outside drawing nearer. The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity. Emily's chest tightened with the weight of the unknown. She could barely keep still, the tension in her body making her feel like a coiled spring ready to snap. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the footsteps stopped. Emily held her breath, listening intently. The silence was deafening. David's hand was on her arm, his grip firm as he pulled her closer to him. His voice was low, barely a whisper. "It's not safe here. We need to move again." Emily's mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and disbelief. She couldn't make sense of anything anymore. Her entire world had turned upside down in the blink of an eye. David moved toward the door, his hand reaching for the handle. The sounds outside were growing louder again, and Emily's heart raced. She had to make a decision, and fast. Just as David turned the handle, the door burst open, and a figure stepped into the room. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the man standing in the doorway. It was Daniel. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood two other men, their faces cold and unreadable. And with them, Emily saw something that made her blood run cold, a briefcase, held tightly in the hands of the man standing just behind Daniel. Daniel's eyes locked onto Emily's, and for a brief moment, she saw a flicker of something. Regret? Guilt? Whatever it was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold, calculating stare of someone she no longer recognized. Emily, Daniel said, his voice devoid of emotion. It's time you learned the truth. The door slammed shut behind them. And for the first time, Emily realized just how deep she was in the web of lies that had been spun around her life.